In this fascinating and sometimes gruesome episode, I speak to Rune Aae about the many ways that Norwegian ospreys have chosen to migrate, some of the shocking ways the ospreys have died or almost died, and more importantly, what we've learned from those. Hello, my name is Sasha Dench, but I'm better known as the human swan. I'm also the UN's ambassador for the Convention on Migratory Species. This year, the charity I founded, Conservation Without Borders, is launching a new expedition to follow the flight of the osprey. So hello Rune. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on a call with us and talk about the Norwegian ospreys, who have got some pretty spectacular stories, I have to say.
Yes, we really love our ospreys and how they have been migrating and acting and giving us really tons of information. So this is so nice.
Can I ask to start with, actually, what is your background? How have you ended up being a follower of ospreys?
Well, actually, I've been interested in birds and botany and insects and everything for many years. I actually never stopped. I was a kid who was tracking animals. So, but I'm starting to climb, like a rock climber. And I've been climbing a lot of mountains, and I figured out that there was no one who was interested in ospreys, because the ospreys are nesting on top of the trees and nobody climbed that tree. So when I got my bird ringing license in 1995, I figured out that this is my niche. So so since then I've been ringing ospreys and birds of prey in general, and ospreys in special. So in 2011 we figured out that we should try to put some satellite trackers on them, and we did, and we still got one left of all the 11 ospreys we have tracked since then.
Okay, you've got one bird left, and I guess again, before we go into that, can you give us a bit of a description of the kinds of habitats that the osprey likes to nest in Norway?
Yes, we have two different types. One is on tiny islands, islets. Maybe the tree is 4 or 5 meters high, and behind the tree there could be a wall of rocks or a forest. So that's one specific type of nest, and the other one is on really huge trees, like 25, 30 meters, but they are solitary trees, maybe on clear cuts, far away from the water. And yeah, so it's so strange that we have two such different types. So and it's becoming more and more common that nesting in the solitary huge trees and only pine trees. We have right now we have 100 nests approximately, and only 2 of them are in pines, and one is in a pylon, and the rest of them are on top of pines.
And does it tend to be, again, like somewhere around the top of the tree, again, where the top of the tree is broken off?
Yeah, that happens a lot. So especially on spruce. So but now we have started to mount some platforms. So we have mounted 154 platforms, and that's a huge success, because now the platform is stable, and we see that the top is not breaking off, and now almost 70% of all our nesting ospreys are on the platforms.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. And so you decided to create the platforms because there was this instability at the tops of a tree.
Exactly. We saw that in 2019, especially in November and February, the wind cast was really strong, and it's becoming stronger and stronger, and more of the nests are falling down.
This is as a result of climate change?
I guess so, because the wind gust is becoming more and more strong, and last year we also had 2 incidents of chicks blowing off the nest. We have never seen that before, because of the wind gust in July, late June, early July. The wind gust could become like 25 meters per second, and the chicks are just blown off the nest.
Do you know what
So
that
that's
is
something new.
kind of kilometers per hour? The 25 meters per second. I'm just trying to.
It's around 80.
80. Oh gosh. Okay.
Yes. So it's really strong wind. And so now we are building platforms so that it's a more specific frame around the nest, and we see that they are really popular among the ospreys.
And the ones that were blown off the nest, for example, how did you find out? Is that because the nests are being watched very carefully, or was they on cameras? Or
exactly. No, we were the two latest one was checked July 6th. July 7th, there was a really strong wind because we were planning to put rings on them on the 7th, so we have to postpone it to the 8th. So when we came on the 8th, they were both on the ground, and there's no other reason than that wind, because the wind broke down a lot of trees, and that was really strong wind that July 7th.
And do you know much of the history of ospreys in Norway? So obviously, for various reasons, in lots of countries in UK and in Southern Europe, there was a lot of persecution in the past, but that didn't necessarily happen in Norway, did it?
It happened. It happened a lot. So all the birds of prey were shot, were killed, were poisoned. So when the osprey was protected in 1962, there were only 4 pair left in Norway. So
wow.
We have been struggling a lot to get the species back, and now the species is kind of normal in southeastern part of Norway and way up in Finnmark. And it's really to divide the population, and the one up north is probably connected to the Russian population instead of the Norwegian, Russian, Finnish populations, because they act differently.
Fascinating. Okay, so speaking of fascinating, you have got some really interesting stories from your birds.
Yeah. Okay, so this is Norway, and we have, as I've said, 11 birds. So this is the autumn. H is autumn in Norwegian, from autumn 11 to autumn 2021. So we have to add a new one just on the west coast of Africa. But anyway, the first 2 birds we satellite tracked was Michael and Lotta. And Michael is the blue line here, down here, and he was shot in Nigeria, and he was the shooter was detained, and we got our satellite tracker back, so we used that one more time.
How on earth did that happen? How did you find out, first of all, that it had been shot, and how was the shooter found?
There was a article in the Nigerian Daily Mail, said a strange bird killed in Adamawa. Got it from Sweden, and because it has Swedish rings. The guy who helped us, he was a Swede, and they figured out that this might be Michael. So and I asked somewhere in Adamawa to find out what kind of building this was, because we saw that the satellite tracker was on a huge building, but nobody in Adamawa could help us. So I contacted Daniel Gongula in the University of Yola, the neighbor city. I sent him the GPS coordinates, and he drove all the way to the neighbor city and found out that this building was a police station. And on that police station, there was a tracker, and there was the shooter, and there was the rings on the birds.
Wow.
So that's how we found out that Michael was shot.
Okay, and do you know why did the shooter decide to shoot an osprey?
Well, it's legal, but it is illegal, but I guess it's for food. So we're seeing that in other countries as well, that poor people are shooting for food. I hope it's for food. I hope it's not for fun. So yeah, nature conservation is difficult when you're hungry and your children are starving. So he didn't give any explanation of why he shot it.
Okay.
So we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And Lotta, the female, that's a purple line, and she ended up in Gambia as well. but sometimes something happens to her satellite tracker, so we lost track of her the next winter. So we don't know what happened to that bird.
Okay.
And then that was in 11, and then we put satellite trackers on them in 15, and then we satellite tracked 3 chicks. And the first one, he disappeared in France, very close to a fishing pond. So we don't know what happened. It maybe he was trying to fish some fish that was privately owned, and but at least it disappeared. Either shot, got stuck in some net, died, whatever. We don't know. There's no record of her after one specific date.
Okay, and you never got the tracker back?
No, it died instantly. That's why I think it shot. It was shot because the tracker just and the tracker was a new one and it should have been lasted for at least 5 years. So it instantly stopped. So something happened. The other one was flying down on Corsica, Sardinia, ended up in Tunis, and instead of flying down south to Cameroon, it decided to go east.
Follow the coast.
And that was a fault because and he found out that it was wrong, so he turned south again and ended up in Chad, starving to death, no water, no fish, nothing. So
he hadn't stopped to fish so far on all that journey. He hadn't stopped.
Nowhere. Okay. So he was this wrong migration is the cause of his death, unfortunately. And we had another one.
And it looks like if he'd gone slightly further, he would have ended up on the Nile, or he could have ended up fishing on the Nile.
Exactly. So before he saw the Nile, he turned south. So that was not nice. And the third chick, this is a brown line. He ended up in Burkina Faso, where he was shot. The two last plots are on the highway, on a car. And we got lost. So all the 3 chicks from 2015 died.
And yeah, so I guess you know that it was shot because it stopped making usual bird movements and ended up following a highway, and that was it. Yeah,
exactly. Okay. And a lot of Norwegian birds are also shot in. We know from earlier projects, different species that are been shot in Burkina Faso. So it's a huge problem in Burkina Faso, illegal shooting. But finally, we got some really nice results from Mr. and Mrs. Southern. They are nesting in a lake called Southern Buksha. So we call them the Southern couple. Okay. And this is the male, and we had him for many years. That's the red lion, and he was narrow, migrating quite narrow in Europe. But when he came down to Africa, he was really widening out, but ended up on the same tree on the Ivory Coast in Ghana, close to the border. And we're not sure what happened to him, but his tracker stopped working when he was fishing. So he either got stuck in a fishing net or he got shot. Because the last plot is in a village in Ivory Coast,
in the middle of the village.
In the middle of jungle. Yes. So, and we never got our hands on that tracker again, so we don't know what happened to that one. It's far away from other people, so, and far away from roads and far away from everything actually. So we don't know what happened.
That just stopped moving.
Yes, and Mrs. Southern, she went all the way down to Guinea-Bissau. But she had some really strange migration pattern, because when she came down to Mali, and instead of going
all the bright green lines, there's okay, right.
So this is so strange, because she ended up out on Guinea-Bissau, in a tiny island in Guinea-Bissau. But before she ended up, she always came down to Mali, and she migrated down west and down south and down east, and look at the last one, all the way down to Nigeria, before she ended up in Guinea-Bissau. And she died in 2020, and satellite tracker is still working. in Mali. She's here. And we have asked a lot of people if they can go out and try to find that satellite tracker. And yes, of course, we can do that if you give us 50 soldiers and armed vehicles. And this is the really jihad area, so nobody dares to go and pick up that tracker. So we don't know what happened. She's lying between two bushes, very close to a lake and close to a village. So we don't know what happened to that one.
Right. And obviously the tracker is still in the sunshine, so it's being charged.
Yes, so we can see that it is working for 2 or 3 days, and then it goes maybe half a year until it works again. So it's still in the same spot. And in 29.
Have you any idea what she was doing in this green line that was heading across towards Nigeria? Because she's only just on the border between the sort of desert and the forested area. Yeah,
she was fishing in rivers mostly, not in lakes, but in rivers. So she was following a lot of rivers. So, but this is so strange. Why go all the way down to Nigeria when you're supposed to be on Guinea-Bissau? But she always ended up in Guinea-Bissau, and she had a kind of narrow migration route back to Norway. But this is also a sad story because because she was kicked out of the nest 2 years later, and with a younger and a stronger female, and she ended up in Sweden, not breeding for 3 years, just fishing,
just enjoying her retirement.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So maybe she was old, that's why she died, because she was not strong enough. And we have seen pictures of her when she was resting on a neighboring nest, and they didn't take any notice of her, the couple that was staying on the nest, meaning she was so weak.
Wasn't a threat. Yeah,
she wasn't a threat. So that's why we think she was old, and she has retired.
Wow.
Yeah, and the two last one is Mrs. and Mr. Rauer, or Huseby or Rauer, and they are down to Western Sahara and Gambia, Senegal.
Okay, but only Mrs. Rauer is still active now. So
exactly.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that summary. It's also interesting to see all the different ways that birds have died. But you have had some involvement or some communication with the Swiss project, and you mentioned that there was an interesting issue there with power lines that I'd never heard of before.
Yes, the first discovered one bird was found down underneath one of these huge pylons, and the autopsy revealed that the spikes that are put on pylons, on niches, whatever, to prevent the birds from landing. He was landing on one of these pylons when it was dark, and one of the spines ended up in his heart, and he was killed by this spine. So
the bird was found on the ground underneath it, and a vet autopsy needed to show that.
Exactly. So then the power company took away all the spikes on these pylons, and hopefully it's never going to happen again. Another close failure was an osprey that was found in the marshland, and he could hardly breathe. So because they could see he was not coming back at night, so they went out with flashlights to try to find it. And when they found it, they could see that the beak and the nostrils and everything was covered with leeches. So they had to take out all the leeches, and then it could breathe again and fly. So that's I've never heard of that problem as well, but apparently that could be a problem.
Me either. Nature is brutal, huh?
It is really brutal.
Humans are pretty brutal. We do a lot of things unintentionally as well. But yeah, nature can be just as bad.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for an absolutely fascinating insight into ospreys across Northern Europe and where they're going. And if possible, we'll also go and look on the rest of West Africa at the sites where that some of your other birds were faithfully coming back to try and see why.
Oh, that is so nice. That is so nice.